you. Again, my name is Dennis Sheehan. A lot of people know me as Manuela's husband. I've recently retired from the City of Phoenix. I was a safety manager for the City of Phoenix. Prior to that, I managed trucking operations. Prior to that, I spent 18 and a half years driving a fuel tanker. So I've worked for two major oil companies. They invest heavily in their drivers. I was very fortunate to receive a great deal of training. I've been certified by Smith System to be a driving coach for Smith. I've been certified by the National Safety Council to teach safe driver awareness. But my greatest experience was my time driving. Driving a 60-foot fuel tanker around the city of Phoenix safely is not easy to do. And when you think about that, you think, gosh, it's really dangerous, driving, 9,000 gallons of gasoline around town, boy, it's so dangerous. But I'll tell you, hauling children around, that payload, that cargo is a lot more precious than the stuff that I used to haul around. And the reason that I've been invited to share with you guys some information about the 15-passenger vans, and that's pretty much what I'm going to focus on today, is that by design they're dangerous. They're not an automobile. They're a truck. They're just a step down from a commercial truck, but they're a truck. Their suspension is different. The way they carry, I'll refer to payload as what we're hauling in back, which is children, but the way we transport that payload, the weight of the cargo we're hauling, is different. And so there's been a history of problems with these vehicles. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But to make it a little bit real, I have a short video clip that I'd like you to watch first.
Florida Highway tonight, a local church mourning the loss of one of their members. That church van, one of three traveling up I-75 when it suddenly lost control.
Several of those passengers ejected, one of them killed. The Night Team's Liz Nagy is live at their church in Lauderhill. Liz?
Robin, when that church group left from here early this morning, they had no intention of their trip ending with part of the group in the hospital, the rest of them here hugging each other and hoping everybody else would be okay. Tonight, one person is dead and a 2-year-old child was rushed to Tampa in immediate need of medical care. Nostradamus, his sister says, was never supposed to go on the cross-state convention trip with their church group, but she begged him to.
Why should Madeline just texted me and told me that Nostra died. Tell me that ain't true. Tell me that ain't true.
But it is.
And I was telling him, breathe, Nostra, just breathe, take your time, just breathe, Nostra.
Her 20-year-old brother was somewhere in the back of this 16-person van, the second in a 3-van caravan.
We were in the car and all of a sudden you heard the tire pop.
I-75, mile marker 123, just south of Fort Myers.
Turned the car like this, and it was leaning too much on that flat tire.
FHP says the back left tire blew out.
When I wake up, I heard some people screaming, so that's why I was hoping that everybody was okay.
The van flipped twice across the highway, tossing passengers out in every direction.
I see my shirt, I see blood.
I saw my brother. I saw him shaking. He was just shaking.
Rescuers scooped up passengers of all ages strewn all over the interstate. They were part of a church group headed from Seventh-day Adventist Church in Lauderhill to Tampa. Their trip stopped on impact.
It is difficult to say exactly where we're going. God knows.
Nostradamus' family and church congregation are still scattered across the state, all of them healing and hurting. Now tonight, just 7 of those people are still in the hospital in Fort Myers. The rest of them have been released with more minor injuries like broken ribs, broken bones, and some scrapes and bruises. The Florida Highway Patrol says this investigation may be particularly complicated, so it's going to take them at least a few days to figure out exactly how this accident happened. Live in Lauderhill tonight, Liz Nagy, 7 News 19.
So, just some basic information. How many people can ride in a 15-passenger van? Like a 12? See, that's a great thought, because I drove a bus here for a little while, one of the big buses when we still had them active, and I've also driven a van. And one of the things that I noticed right away is that as soon as you open the door, here they're coming. And so we kind of let the kids run the show. But ultimately, it's the driver's responsibility to manage that vehicle and to manage who's coming on, manage the people's safety, who's going on the bus. So, commercially, when you need a P endorsement or a commercial driver's license to transport people, normally it's for when you're hauling 16 people or more. So if you have more than 15 people on one of the neighborhood's vans, would you need a commercial driver's license? Well, the answer is no, because the vehicle is designed to transport 15 people. So you wouldn't be required to have a commercial driver's license, but what you could be subject to would be citing for having the vehicle at overcapacity. So if something happens, if your vehicle is involved in some incident, it doesn't even have to be a major collision, but something happens, we get rear-ended out there, it's no fault whatsoever of yours, the police are called, they come out, and what's the police officer's job when they come out to a scene of an accident? Say it again, Victor. Investigate. That's good. Yes. Yes. What else? Exactly. They're there to find out who's at fault. Not what's at fault, who's at fault. And when I talk about vehicle collisions, I talk about collisions. I don't talk about accidents, because collisions or accidents sort of insinuate that nobody was at fault. But that's not what the police officer is going to do. He's going to come out and he's going to assess fault. And so even if you were in the right and somebody collided in you, you could be subject for getting cited for vehicle overcapacity. What's the legal requirement in the state of Arizona for wearing seatbelts? Okay, we've got everybody wears a seatbelt. 8 above. What Arizona law states is that everybody in the front seat of a passenger vehicle has to be restrained. In the back seat, everybody who is 18 years and under has to be restrained. Now, the best rule of thumb is that everybody in the vehicle is restrained in the vehicle, because what actually happens is, and the video talked a little bit about it, is that people are thrown out of the vehicle. When they roll, everything that's in there is going out. And they're not only dangerous to the people that are not restrained and getting thrown out of the vehicle, they're a danger to the other people within that vehicle, because they essentially become missiles. You have everything loose in that vehicle, flying at a very high rate of speed, and other passengers are generally injured because other passengers are not restrained. Here at Neighborhood Ministry, if you should happen to be involved in something, if you get a speeding ticket, if you get involved in some sort of cited offense by a police officer, who's responsible for the ticket? There you go. Yes, you are. Because there's no budget for citations here at Neighborhood Ministry. You're going to be on the hook for that citation. So your own personal driver's license at risk. And so if anything, you should have a vested interest to want to operate safely so that your driver's license is protected. Because if your insurance rates go up, you're paying the price. Marco? In Arizona, state law says that you cannot transport children to and from school, state-required school, in a 15-passenger van. That's the state law. Now, you can take them to secondary events, to field trips, things of that nature, but to and from school, it's illegal in the state of Arizona to use a 15-passenger van. In 15-passenger vans, occupants in the vehicle of 10 or more are 3 times more likely, the rollover rate is 3 times more likely than that of people with 10 people in the vehicle or less. So what we're talking about is the amount of weight that's in that vehicle. Not only because the weight in these vehicles is moving. People don't sit still. And I remember being a kid and wanting to rock the vehicle back and forth, and we get everybody on board, getting everybody to rock, and it was fun. I was completely oblivious to what the hazard was. But the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, their research shows that the greatest cause of 15-passenger vehicles is, number one, that the drivers are not experienced. They haven't had the appropriate training. The vans generally have improper sized or underinflated tires. Now, if you remember the video that we saw, what failed on that is the left rear tire. Now, this is going to be important. We're going to talk a little bit about it later on. But that's a very important thing. Incorrectly loaded cargo or passengers on the vehicle. We're talking about weight distribution on the vehicle, and it's a huge factor in the stability of these vehicles. Marco? These are some statistics, fatality statistics from 2003 to 2007. I realize it's a little dated, but this was the material that's available. But bottom line is, if you are a passenger on a 15-passenger van, you are 80% more likely to have a fatality as a passenger than you will be as a driver. 80% more. Why do you think that is? Exactly. Drivers always put on their seatbelts, and we let people in the back part of the vehicle, we don't even worry about it. Oh, there's so many people around me, I'm going to be protected. You can't protect somebody when that vehicle's rolling over. Next, Marco. Now, why do you think they have a tendency to roll over? By looking at this slide. What's different on this vehicle than a regular school bus? Victor? Yes. It's not only the sliding door, but if you look at the 2 center rows, they're pushed to the driver's side of the vehicle. Now, if we think about weight distribution, that's shifting more of the weight on the vehicle to the left side of the rear. Now, when the kids get on a van in a neighborhood, where do they go first? Back seat, of course. Right to the back seat. And I'll tell you, that's the most dangerous place to be on a 15-passenger van, because we're talking about weight distribution, and what happens? All the weight winds up getting transferred to the left rear tire. Now, what tire blew on that van that rolled over? Left rear tire. It's critical. That weight distribution on that vehicle is critical in keeping the vehicle stable and upright as you're driving. So now, this is kind of a representative of one of the neighborhood's vans. And if you look at it as a vehicle, what do you notice that's different than a regular van? What do you see different between the back axle, between here and here? It's extended. It's longer. It's pushed out. You have the same wheelbase as a regular van, but what they've done to increase the passenger capacity on these vehicles is they've just pushed out the cab. They've pushed it out further so you can put more weight on the back. And that's what happens. The weight winds up going on the back. The other part is that they're taller. Now, why would taller make a difference? Exactly. Now, center of gravity is anything above ground level is a higher center of gravity. Center of gravity is the floor, the ground. That's center right there. Now, most automobiles run 4 to 6 inches off the bottom of the street. That's where their center of gravity is. If you look at a 15-passenger van, they're usually about 15 inches above, just the axle's about 15 inches above center of gravity. But you have a stiffer suspension, the vehicle's lifted higher, and then you have seats that are up another 2 feet at least where passengers are seating. So you're pushing the weight distribution up on that vehicle. Now, if you think about what that might do, imagine I'm holding a long stick. And I have, on this stick, I have a piece of rope and a 1-gallon container of water. Now, I could take that gallon container, I could move it back and forth pretty easy. But if I took that gallon of water and I put it at the end of the stick and tried to move it back and forth, it would be much harder. It would be much difficult because now all of a sudden the weight on that vehicle is calling the shots. It's distributing how the motion of the vehicle is going to be. So instead of the vehicle moving the participants are moving the vehicle. That's one of the hazards. So the more capable we are of keeping the participants fastened down and secure, the more stable that vehicle is going to be. So by nature, these vehicles are hazardous. That's why they've made them illegal in the state of Arizona for transporting students. Now, they're a reasonably cost-effective vehicle. If we had to go out and get school buses, then we're looking at a different grade of driver's license. Less people would be available to operate them. And so, I'm starting out pointing out all the hazards, and we're going to get into, well, what do I do if, a little bit later on. Next slide. So just by looking at the two vehicles, a 15-passenger van and a school bus, tell me what the differences are. School buses are longer. The weight's distributed evenly. That's a great point because you don't have those seats pushed off to the one side. What else? What do you think is, yes? Yes. That was the answer to the next question I was just going to ask. Very good. That's the deciding factor. If you have a tire failure on the rear of a school bus, you got a tire right next to it. So the vehicle is not going to drop, the whole shift of the load is not going to transfer down, and the vehicle is not going to roll. That's why kids have to be transferred to school on a school bus and not a 15-passenger van. And they're much heavier. Their weight is distributed better. They have a wider wheelbase. The wheelbase is stretched out much longer, so they're able to carry a heavy load more stable than the 15-passenger van. Now, did that look like it took very much to flip that thing over? Run that one once more, Marco. What do you think caused the problem? Weight? Yes. What else? Expand on that for me. Okay. Yes. Any other factors? Speed. Good. We got all three. That's what I was looking for. You guys are quick. Do the next slide, Marco. This is the same slide, a little slower. Now imagine if that's loaded with kids, especially if they're not restrained. I mean, imagine that. Now go through it and go bite by bite. We're gonna analyze this incident and see what happens. So you can. That's all right. There you go. So he swerved to the right, and if you look, his wheels weren't tight. I mean, turned drastically sharp. But if you look at it, I mean, he's not turned very sharp, and yet that right front wheel is almost lifted off the ground by now because of the weight distribution. The payload is up high. It's up high, and it's pushing the whole top of the vehicle over. Moving on a little bit, Marco. Now he's straightened it out, but now that vehicle is still moving. Even though the wheel's straightened out, it's still moving. Go ahead, Marco. A little bit. There. So one of the big problems is that once we swerve to move that vehicle, we realize we're off course, and what do? We try to adjust. And more often than not, what we do is we overcompensate. And we could do that in an automobile because our center of gravity is so low. But when we have our center of gravity up higher, now all of a sudden the top of the vehicle is doing this. And we got a pretty stiff suspension so that it can carry the payload, but it doesn't give you the give that an automobile would give. And you can see how, again, it didn't take a whole lot of overcompensating. So give me some reasons why you would swerve to miss something. Pardon me? Debris on the road? Little person in the road? That's a great example. A dog. Now, what are you going to do when you see this, what are you going to do when a dog runs out in front of you? Hit it. I am serious. Hit the dog. It's better to kill a dog than 10 kids. I mean, really. And that's one of the things you have to learn as a commercial driver is sometimes you just got to disregard what's going to happen because your main objective is to keep that vehicle on its wheels. And swerving from a dog, you're more likely to flip that thing over, and that family's probably got 12 more pups in their house anyway, so just don't worry about the dog. But what about a child? What are you going to do? I'm going to hit the child? That's a tough question. And so, there's a lot of judgment placed on the driver's best capabilities. I mean, you guys are the ones that are going to make the call. And so, but one of the things we're going to talk a little bit more is looking beyond the obvious. Because one of the things professional drivers learn to do is they constantly are scanning the road to look for hazards, constantly looking for things that are going to come out and disturb our driving, seeing the dog in the person's front yard before the thing's in the road, and being prepared to be able to react that in a safe way. Yes, sir. Afterwards. Okay. Okay. Stop afterwards safely. So what can I do? What can you guys do? I mean, we've talked a little bit about the hazard that's associated with the vehicle. So what can you guys do? That's a great answer. Absolutely. Absolutely. When we get off on an off-ramp, frequently you'll be coming off an off-ramp and it'll say posted speed is 40 miles an hour. But you'll see a little yellow sign a little bit further on which says 35. So the difference is that the sign that's black and white is the posted speed limit. The lower speed limit that the sign's in yellow is a suggested speed limit for vehicles that are heavier than an automobile. And so, again, knowing that you're comfortable with certain speeds driving in your automobile is one thing. But when you're driving a vehicle like a 15-passenger van, they cannot corner like an automobile. They cannot take corners, get an off-ramp that easily. Again, slow is the greatest rule. If you've never driven a 15-passenger van before and you just want to serve the ministry, it's a wonderful thing. But it's not wrong to reach out for help. It's not wrong to ask somebody to say, you know, I'm not comfortable doing this right now. That's an important thing, and only you can make that call. It's important to recognize that. If you're not comfortable, there's resources here to help you to become comfortable. And I'm available too. So there's resources available. We need you to be responsible and make the appropriate call. Passenger safety is your responsibility. In my brief time that I drove a bus here, boy, that was probably the toughest part of the whole driving job, was managing the kids on the vehicles. And what I learned from that experience is that you guys would be very well served if you can grab a buddy and say, hey, can you come with me on this trip? I need to be able to drive. I need somebody to manage these kids. They're crazy. They're all wound up. They're all whatever they are. But I can't do that. We can't afford to have that. And so reach out to a friend. Get some assistance to manage the kids. And the other part is that it's okay to be late. We talked about speed. If you're bringing these kids to the class and you get delayed in some fashion, don't worry about being a little bit late. You're better off having the kids late than having them not arrive at all. And the way to keep a 15-passenger vehicle, or the passengers on a 15-passenger vehicle safe, is to keep the vehicle safe. Rather than just going out and grabbing a set of keys and going out and jumping in the vehicle and taking off, there's some steps we ought to be doing prior to getting on the road. Marco? So before the trip, it's important to do a vehicle inspection. Commercial drivers have to do it all the time. They have to do it before and after every shift, every driver, because vehicles don't break down or lights don't fail and brakes don't have problems while they're parked in a parking lot. They wind up failing in operation. And a lot of times, the person who's done with the van just wants to go home, listening to screaming kids all night long. I just want to go home. And yeah, I knew that left rear tire was a little bit low, but the next guy can pick up on it. And so it's really important that, first of all, just give it a good visual inspection. Look at the tires. If they look low, find somebody, get some assistance. I don't know who's handling the vehicle maintenance now. Hopefully, you guys are going to cover that. Okay. And so, and the other thing is to, look underneath, see if you have fluid leaks. If you've got coolant running out of the vehicle, don't take it out. Your likelihood of burning the motor up is real high, especially in Arizona. Look at the lights. Go around. It's easy to check all your lights, all your turn signals, and get a buddy to check the brake lights. Because the last thing you want is a secondary problem because of some silly little thing like my turn signal was out and I needed to make a right-hand turn. They didn't know it, and somebody plows into me with a truckload of kids. One of the things that I learned by riding here was plan your route. Know where you're going before you go there. Even take your personal vehicle and just get an idea what this route is like, if at all possible. Because what you don't want to be doing on the road is making unnecessary turns. You don't want to go down some dead-end street and all of a sudden now I'm subject to backing, which is a horrible thing to do in any vehicle that you're dependent on its mirrors. And so you want to avoid situations like that. And the best way to avoid it is by knowing where you're going all the time. And have important contact information with you. Just having good contact information, good contact numbers of people that are available. Again, if issues with the vehicles, have that information with you because you don't want to be looking for it while you're on the road. Next slide, Marco. So, passenger safety. So we saw that the big cause of left rear tire failure on these vehicles is the way the passengers are loaded on the vehicle. And we know that the kids love to go right in the rear seat because that's where everybody goes first. But it's your responsibility to manage that load that you have on that vehicle. And the safest place to have those kids is up front first and then move them back. So fill up from the first row first and then slowly fill up the back. It may take a little bit of, hey, you need to sit up front. Hey, you need a little bit to sit up front. You may have to do it 50 times in your trip, but do it. It's worth the effort. You got to keep that vehicle stable. Say that again, Wayne? Yes. Yes. As Wayne said, if you've got a buddy there, if you have somebody assisting you, have them sit in the rear and make sure that those kids are not in the back. And make sure the kids are staying in their seats till the vehicle stopped. Again, we want to do everything possible to avoid getting that vehicle rocking and moving back and forth. We need to keep the vehicle stable. If you have to interact with somebody, when you have to interact with somebody on a vehicle, because it's not if, it's when, don't do it while you're driving. Pull over someplace safely, put it in park, and deal with the kid then. Don't deal with them on the road. No matter what they're doing, keep your eyes on the road, focus on driving, pull off as soon as it's safe, and deal with them. Have all the kids keep their hands inside the windows. It's important. Last thing you want is some kid losing an arm because they got their hands flying out the windows and you whack a sign and now they have one less limb. And again, one last time, get somebody to help you with the kids. That's really a critical thing here. Next slide. Okay, so what happens? What do we do if something happens? Well, first of all, we do want to drive slow. Again, we covered that a little bit. These vehicles are not designed to go fast, or not designed to corner well. Just by design, it's best that they operate slower. Manage your space distance. Does anybody know what the 3-second rule is? How many people drive a vehicle here? Okay. So, I'll ask again. Anybody know what the 3-second rule is? Yes, sir. Yes. So what we're wanting to do is keep enough distance between us and the vehicle in front of us. And I'll tell you, what do you think the normal following distance is in Phoenix for vehicles here? That's pretty accurate. It's usually a half a second or less. Now, if you have to stop, if the vehicle in front of you, if the dog runs out in the vehicle in front of you and he doesn't hit the dog, he's trying to stop or do whatever, and he hits his brake, it takes you 3/4 of a second for your brain to recognize, oh no, 3/4 of a second right now. It's going to take you another 3/4 of a second to get your foot off the gas and get it on the brake. So you got 1.5 seconds right now just responding to what's going on in front of you. Well, too late. You're in their trunk right now. And so what 3 seconds will do, so we're driving down the road, we see the vehicle in front of us, they pass a fixed object. It can be a telephone pole, it can be a vehicle parked on the side of the road. As they pass it, we look at that back bumper and we go 1,001, 1,002, 1,003. As long as we have that much distance between us and that vehicle in front of us, you're pretty much safe. And the nice thing about a 3-second rule is it adjusts for our speed. If you're going 40 miles an hour and you have a 3-second distance between you and the vehicle in front of you, you are a set distance. But if you're going 50 miles an hour and follow 3-second distance, your distance has been extended. It's a little bit further. Now, why don't people keep 3 seconds between themselves and the vehicle in front of them? They're impatient. What would happen if you leave 3 seconds between you and the vehicle in front of you? Oh, would that really happen? Somebody would really cut in front of you. You leave space in front of you and somebody's going to cut in front of you. So I believe that's true. Now imagine that you live in Surprise and you got to come to Neighborhood Ministries, and imagine you've made this decision that I'm going to keep 3 seconds between me and the vehicle in front of me from Surprise to Phoenix. How many people would you say are going to cut in front of you? A lot. Give me a number. $20. From Surprise to here, 3 seconds. Give me another number. It's going to be a lot more than 20. 50. I'm going to double it. Let's say 100. People are pulling in front of you every single time you back off, they're getting in. So if we take 100 times that somebody has moved in front of you, if you've had to extend your trip by 3 seconds every time somebody cuts in, what's 100 times 3 seconds? Come on now, I know some of you are college graduates. What's 100 times 3 seconds? 300 seconds, very good. How many minutes? 5 minutes. Can we normally, that when we start looking at it that way, would we be willing to stay out of a collision for 5 minutes on our trip? I'll tell you, when you're involved in a collision, you wish you had the 3 seconds back. And what you find is when you learn to keep a cushion of distance between you and the vehicle in front of you, that 3-second distance, you find that your trip is more enjoyable, you're more rested and relaxed, and what you will find if you are flying over I-17 in a helicopter, what you will find is you're going to find a whole packet of cars driving down the freeway at a certain speed. There's going to be a large gap of space behind them, and then you're going to have a whole nother packet of people behind them. So considering that, where do you want to drive? Right in the middle. You're still going the same speed as the people in front of you. You're just not in the pack. That's the chaos. That's where all of a sudden pileups happen, and you have no choice but to run into somebody. But if you stay out of the pack, you're not losing any time at all. You're out of all the chaos involved, and he cut me off, and she cut me off, and he's riding my tail, and blah, 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 and all the rest of the stuff. You're not involved in that at all, and it's really an enjoyable way to drive. Active, especially driving a 15-passenger van, you need to be active looking beyond the front of the vehicle. You need to be looking beyond the vehicle in front of you. Now, commercially, we're taught to look 15 seconds down the road. So we talked about a 3-second space management. What we want to do is scan the road 15 seconds down the road, because I need to know what's happening up there. When I'm driving a load of gasoline that weighs 80,000 pounds on the freeway, I can't stop. And I need to know what's going on up there. And you guys need to drive the vans just the same way, because you cannot stop the way an automobile can stop. You've got all that weight of the vehicle pushing you. You still have the same amount of wheels, and if you really think about it, there's only about maybe 24 inches of rubber on the road at every time. When those tires are on the road, you just have a little patch of rubber on the bottom. The rest of the tire is off. So your only resistance to that road is a very small piece of that tire. And so, considering the amount of weight that's on the vehicle and the momentum that it has traveling, you really need to be watching, see what's going on. And that's also going to prevent you from having to overcompensate in driving and to react suddenly. Constantly scan the road. You know, when you got a load of kids, it's hard to do, but you need to know what's alongside of you. You need to know what's along back of you. A lot of times we're just focused on what's in front of us. And too often, especially when we become you're dependent on using mirrors in these vehicles. That's the other big difference. You can't just look over your shoulder. You need to look over your shoulder, but you can't just depend on that, because these vans have a much longer side and there's big blind spots. You need to be aware of the hazards associated with the vehicle. Check your mirrors frequently. That's the other thing. You get used to scanning the road. Look in the mirror. You don't have to stare in the mirror, but you need to look in it to see. I passed a red Buick here 5 minutes ago. I'm not seeing it now. I wonder where it went. And if we can look, and we look around in our mirror, all of a sudden we can see it's sitting in one of our blind spots. But we need to know what's traveling around us as we're driving. And eliminate backing whenever possible. One of the key things, we have kids run over every year in Arizona, and horribly, a lot of times it's their parents. They're coming out of the garage. Imagine you get in, you come out of the house, you get in the garage, you open up the door, you're coming out, and you feel this, and it's like, uh-oh. Now imagine this day. You go out there, you've just run over your child, your neighbor's child. You got to call the police. What are the police going to do? What are they there to do? They're assess fault. Who's at fault? Why didn't we look? Now, especially in a neighborhood where we've got kids all over the place, what the important thing to do is to stage your vehicle as you're parking it. Stage it in a way so that you don't have to back up when you're leaving. Give yourself 6 or 7 feet behind the vehicle in front of you so you don't have to back up at all. You just pull out and go. It would be best to park along the sidewalk area as opposed to in the parking spaces, because you know what Monday nights is like. I mean, we got kids all over the place. What you don't want to be doing is backing up where there's kids all over, because they're assuming you know what you're doing. I mean, that's the big key. The kids are relying on you. Next slide, Marco. Yes. And I'm glad you brought that up, Wayne, because if you're in a situation where you have to back, have a spotter, have somebody out behind, not just behind the vehicle, because you don't want to run over your spotter. You need to be able to communicate with your spotter. You need to be able to see him in the mirror. And if they start backing up, and what do spotters do? They wind up walking right behind the vehicle. Yeah, we're okay here. Well, you can't see him. So what do you do when you can't see your spotter? You failed. No driving for you. No soup for you. Stop. Just stop. And they'll think, well, what are you doing? Well, they'll come out and they'll stand in your mirror like, say, get out so I can see you. Now I can back up. So those little steps can really assist. If you have a tire failure, the big thing is don't panic. We saw what can happen. And what can happen is what happens when people all of a sudden react and they turn their wheels aggressively back and forth. The vehicle's not going to roll over if you continue to go straight. So the best thing to do is it's going to be noisy, it's going to vibrate. If the tire starts coming off, it's going to be taking out little pieces of plastic and maybe some metal. But it won't do any real harm if you keep the vehicle going straight. So the key is to slow down slowly. Don't make any aggressive moves with the brakes. Don't make any aggressive moves with the steering wheel, because even though it drops down on the one wheel, if you can continue to go straight, the vehicle's still got as much stability as it possibly can, and slow down slowly. Next slide. Who has a cell phone? Who knows we shouldn't use a cell phone when we drive? Who uses a cell phone when we drive? Oh, come on. We're in church, you got to be honest. Of course we do. And cell phone usage while we're driving has become such an issue, is that the federal government has created a whole department called distracted driving. Go to distracteddriving.gov and you're going to see all these testimonies of people who have lost children, who have their children killed and have people killed because people using a cell phone. They're addictive. Our cell phones are addictive. And what I'm telling you is that these 15 passengers van don't care about your cell phone. They don't care. And just the fact that it's ringing and you grab it and you look down, if you take your eyes off the road for those 5 seconds, because it's going to take at least that for your brain to realize I'm focusing on the road and now I've got to focus on the phone, it's not just a matter of a second. It takes time for our brain to adjust. And so the best thing to do is turn it off. Just turn it off. It's too much of a distraction, even if it rings, because we just can't let the darn thing ring. We have to at least look, or if we hear a text come up, or whatever it is. And so don't put yourself in that position. Put it away. You can get all the messages when you stop. Don't eat or drink when you're driving. It seems silly, but I mean, imagine having a big old hamburger. Well, what are big old hamburgers wrapped in? Big old hunks of paper. And those big old hunks of paper, when we go to put them in our face, create huge blind spots. We can't see. And you dump a hot cup of coffee in your lap when you're driving down the road. That's a distraction. And you can lose a vehicle by allowing that to happen. So, get your beverages and your refreshments before you hit the road and when you get back. Passengers, I can't stress that enough. Get help. Get help. Get help. If you don't have a buddy, find out who's the oldest person on the van or the most responsible kid on the van. Put them in charge, saying, I need your help. There's some responsible kids out there. And emotions. We love to engage. They cut me off. What do we do? I'm coming down Van Buren just on here, and all of a sudden I saw that there was a lane closure up here. And so I need to get over. I turn my signal on. So what does the lady do behind me? Speed up. Yes, of course. Speed up. You're not going to cut in front of me because I can't afford 3 seconds. So I wait. Some good-natured person's going to allow me to come in. And it keeps me out of cutting off, being all ticked off at her and whatever, or him, or whoever it may be. But it's really a professional driver that can disengage emotionally when people are doing stupid things on the road. And I'll tell you, people are stupid. People are stupid. And on the road, they're stupid with a weapon. It's a horrible combination, but that's what we wind up having. So don't engage. If you get in some situation that you feel yourself all wrapped up and knotted up, well, park someplace and give yourself a few minutes. Just get out of the vehicle, take a walk around, kick somebody's dog, do something, but just take care of yourself in the moment. Again, don't be in a hurry. And the next video that we're going to watch is a little bit, it's kind of comical, but it goes to show what happens when we let our emotions get the best of us. Go ahead, Marco.
Excuse me. I know you didn't think anyone would catch you, but you just slammed your door into my car. The least you can do is say you're sorry, lady. You don't have to take that tone. It's not like I'm hurting your resale value. I'm sorry. See? Like that.
Now, who of us haven't wanted to do this? So considering what you just saw, what could have prevented all of that? What was the lady looking for? An apology. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That goes a long way. Kindness, consideration is important. Is there any questions? You guys have been great. Thank you very much. Drive safe out there, please.